Geburtstag, you lazy bum. Go find some dry branches. If it's not enough to burn, you'll be next. The loud shout, followed by a shove, snapped Li Ming out of his daze. The force sent him stumbling to the ground, landing on his but with a thud. Ha! Geburtstag, you're even weaker than a ground rat. Laughter erupted all around him, shrill, mocking, WAWA, noises that made Li Ming look up. His eyes widened at the sight. The ones laughing were a gang of short, ugly, green-skinned monsters. Their bodies were scrawny, with bloated bellies sticking out awkwardly. Their grotesque faces looked comical and ridiculous, no matter how you stared at them. They came in various sizes, but most stood around 1.1 meters tall. Covered in crude animal hides and reeking to high heaven, their stench hit Li Ming like a brick wall, so vile it nearly choked him. Goblin. Level 4. Strength 9. Defense 8. Agility 7. Magic 0. Li Ming blinked in shock. He could somehow see the goblin status screens, like in a video game. The realization sent a chill down his spine. Still not moving, snapped the goblin leader. Glaring at him, Li Ming flinched and, acting like he was terrified, which wasn't far from the truth, turned and bolted deeper into the forest to look for firewood. The goblins laughed again. That same obnoxious WAWA sound echoing in the trees. What the hell is going on? As he jogged through the forest, Li Ming wore a confused frown. Moments ago, he had just stepped out of the bathroom, and now he was in some unfamiliar wilderness. To make sure he wasn't dreaming, he pinched his arm hard. Pain shot through him, making him gasp. Nope, definitely not a dream. Wait, arm? He looked down, and his eyes nearly popped out of his head. His stomach had turned into a round, bloated green mound. His arms and legs were green too. He was a goblin? Did he just transmigrate to another world and become a goblin? That horrifying realization made Li Ming's face twist with dread. No way. Hell no. I don't want to be a gross goblin. His wail echoed through the shadowy forest. Multi-fertility system activated. Character interface unlocked. A mechanical voice suddenly echoed in his mind, making him cry out again in shock. Before his eyes, a golden status window appeared. What is this? He reached out, but his hand passed right through the floating display. Name, Li Ming. Race, Goblin. Level 1. Strength 6. Defense 5. Agility 5. Magic 5. Skills. Hyperfertility. 1 pregnancy produces 20 offspring. 1 goblin becomes an entire army. Rapid growth. As long as there's enough food, your offspring grow and evolve quickly. Genetic enhancement. Offspring inherit the female's talents and are enhanced by your goblin genetics. The stronger the female, the greater the potential. Skill plunder. Mating allows you to randomly copy 1 skill from the partner. Gluttonous devourer. Eating flesh and blood increases your attributes. Life simulation. Forecast events 30 days into the future. What is this? Some twisted plan to turn me into a demon lord of another world. All his abilities were either evil or golden tiered. Li Ming's mind went blank for a moment. Back on Earth, he had just been an average guy, living a normal life. Sure, he loved reading fantasy novels about otherworldly adventures, but now that it was really happening to him, he didn't know how to feel. And what's worse, he had become a hideous goblin. First things first, I need to survive. He recalled those other ugly goblins, probably part of a small forest tribe, barely more than a dozen in total. He picked up the pace and began collecting firewood deeper in the forest. Once he was far enough from camp, he sat down under a large tree. Start the life simulation. Predicting the future could help him avoid danger. Right now, staying alive was his top priority. Starting life simulation. You return to camp carrying a large bundle of wood. You find the goblin camp destroyed by an adventurer party. Terrified, you hide in the bushes, trembling. The adventurers leave. You remain hidden, wary. A cautious archer from the team drops from a tree. You survive only because you were on alert. To stay alive and grow stronger, you eat goblin corpses. You grow stronger. You trail the adventurers, scavenging the bodies they leave behind. You eat goblins. You eat more goblins. You eat a gray-furred wolf. You eat a forest boar. You eat a mole rat. You follow the adventurers and witness them battle an earth demon bear. You stay hidden and watch. The adventurers defeat the bear. You wait, knowing the archer is highly alert. The archer leaves. You move in and devour the bear's corpse. You grow stronger, evolving into a goblin warrior. The adventurers return and spot you. You throw a rock at the knight, knocking him into the mage. Both fall unconscious. You crush the fighter's head with another stone. The rogue hiding in the forest escapes. You stomp the unconscious knight's skull. You devour the knight and the fighter. You grow stronger. The mage and archer become your captives. You retreat deep into the forest and build a wooden cabin by a stream. The mage and archer wake up terrified. You are very excited. They scream. You attempt to mate with them. They scream louder. You get more excited. Days later, you discover that Eileen and Martha are pregnant. You hunt fiercely, preparing for the arrival of your children. 2 weeks later, 51 goblin offspring are born. They're tiny but grow rapidly each day. One day, while hunting, adventurers discover your cabin. You return to find your children slaughtered. Eileen and Martha are gone. You're filled with rage. You are killed. A single gust of wind shot an arrow straight through your skull. Life simulation ended. Countdown, 30 days. Wait, dead already? Reborn into a new world for less than a month and already got killed? This world really is dangerous. Li Meng stood up, brushing the dirt off the animal hide he'd been lying on. Then, like a good little goblin, he started gathering dry branches and twigs for firewood. Sure, he knew humans would raid the goblin camp and probably slaughter everyone. But still, never say never. What if today was the one time things went differently? And if he came back empty-handed? He'd definitely get beaten. The forest was full of resources, at least. After about an hour, Li Meng was trudging back to the camp with a fat bundle of firewood on his back. Not bad. Pretty lucky today. Yeah, looks like our food and lodging costs are covered. Captain, should we keep pushing deeper into the woods? Just as Li Meng was nearing the temporary goblin encampment, he heard voices, not in goblin tone. What was even weirder, he could actually understand them. Walking calmly through the forest, Li Meng kept his face composed. His life simulation ability had accurately predicted this. Sure enough, an adventurer party had shown up. The stench of fresh blood made him frown. Without hesitation, Li Meng ditched the firewood and dove into a nearby bush, rolling into the undergrowth. Crouching low, he crept forward carefully. Humans? From the other side of the thicket, he saw them, 5 of them in total. 3 men, 2 women. They all looked Western, European, or American. Perhaps. 2 of the men wore crude armor. One carried a sword and shield, the other a massive battle axe. The 3rd man was in leather armor, wielding a short dagger. Of the 2 women, one wore mage robes and held a staff. The other had a bow slung across her back. They were all cheerfully cutting off goblin ears. Adventurers, huh? Li Meng recognized the archetype, common in the fantasy novels he'd read. Adventurers didn't have fixed homes. They traveled the continent hunting monsters for coin. He took a quick glance at their status screens. Peaking level 23. Race, human. Class height. Strength, 49. Defense, 61. Agility, 41. Mana, 29. War cry, sonic wave attack. Taunts magical creatures. Shield bash, holy light enhanced shield slam. Shield wall, holy light enhanced defense. Devotion, your faith makes you immune to poisons and increases magic resistance against curses. Leakier, level 25. Race, human. Class, warrior. Strength, 54. Defense, 43. Agility, 41. Mana, 38. Axe mastery, skilled in using battle axes. Tenacity, your unyielding spirit boosts curse resistance. Eileen, level 21. Race, human. Class, archer. Strength, 37. Defense, 26. Agility, 58. Mana, 35. Flame arrow. Small fire explosion on impact. Bow mastery. Increased accuracy with bows. Martha, level 27. Race, human. Class, mage. Strength, 16. Defense, 13. Agility, 11. Mana, 67. Fireball. Launches an exploding fireball. Explosion fireball. A more intense explosive spell. Odyssey, level 25. Race, human. Class, assassin. Strength, 41. Defense, 27. Agility, 63. Mana, 37. Weak spot detection. Reveals enemy vulnerabilities. Fatal strike. High chance of instant kill on weak spots. Phantom step. You're very, very fast. Li Meng held his breath, not daring to move. These adventurers were way out of his league right now. If they spot me, I'm toast. He glanced at the brutalized goblin corpses littering the ground, fear flashing in his eyes. He couldn't even win a fight with a chicken right now. If they found him, it'd be game over. No second chances. Luckily for him, fortune favored the cautious. The adventurers didn't notice him. After harvesting goblin ears, they packed up and left in a hurry. Li Meng stayed hidden, listening intently as their footsteps faded into the forest. Only after complete silence returned did he almost relax. Almost, because there was always that sneaky 6th member hiding in a tree. Sure enough, moments later, a slim armored figure leapt down from the canopy and ran off to regroup with the others. Captain, looks like nothing slipped through. Goblin brains aren't exactly built for stealth. If any were left, they'd have charged at us already. Maybe it's just me, but I had a weird feeling, like one was still nearby. This forest messes with your head. Totally normal. As their voices faded into the distance, a cold sweat ran down Li Meng's forehead. If it hadn't been for his life simulation warning him, his ears might have been cut off right now. He waited even longer, until the forest returned to absolute stillness, before crawling out of the bushes. He looked around at the goblin corpses strewn across the forest floor, face blank. With the tribe gone, could he really survive here? He had zero wilderness experience. Sure, even goblins knew how to make fire, but fire wasn't enough. He needed food. Food. His eyes flicked toward the goblin corpses, a flicker of greed in his gaze. His stomach growled violently, and suddenly, the smell of blood didn't seem so off-putting after all. Get stronger, get stronger, get stronger. Gripped by the fear of death, Li Meng whispered these words like a chant, hypnotizing himself. He bent down and picked up the upper half of a mutilated goblin corpse from the ground. Then, baring his sharp teeth, he sank them into the flesh. Immediately, the eerie sound of bones cracking and flesh tearing echoed through the forest. Crunch, crunch, crack. So good, so delicious. Li Meng looked utterly crazed, devouring the body like a starving beast. Bones, guts, even intestines still coated in filth, he swallowed it all. His bulging stomach seemed bottomless. No matter how much he ate, it was never enough. As the goblin meat entered his belly, he felt a warm current spreading through his body. He could feel it. He was getting stronger, slowly but surely. Within just 30 minutes, Li Meng had devoured every last goblin corpse on the battlefield. Only scattered pools of blood remained as silent witnesses to the carnage that had taken place. Am I actually getting stronger? With a thought, a translucent status panel appeared in front of him. Name, Li Meng. Race, Hobgoblin. Level, 11. Strength, 31. Defense, 25. Agility, 24. Magic, 27. Rapid breeding. 1 birth equals 20 offspring. 1 is an army. Rapid growth. With enough food, offspring evolve and mature at extreme speed. Genetic enhancement. Crossbreeding with other races will only yield goblins, but offspring will inherit the mother's talents. The stronger the mother, the greater the potential. Skill plunder. After mating, you have a chance to copy a random skill from the partner. Gluttonous devourer. Consuming flesh strengthens your attributes. Hobgoblin? I evolve into 1. Li Meng looked down at his body in disbelief, then glanced around. His perspective had noticeably risen. He was taller now. During the frenzy, he had grown to about 1.3 meters tall. Even his bloated belly had changed. It looked tighter, more muscular. Defined abs were starting to show through. Tilting his head slightly, Li Meng looked in the direction the adventurer party had gone. After a moment's hesitation, he followed them. He was still weak, too weak to survive alone. Those adventurers hadn't come to this forest for a picnic. If he followed them and scavenged what they left behind, he might grow even stronger. Over the next few days, Li Meng trailed that adventurer party through the forest, feeding off the leftovers. The life simulation system accurately predicted every encounter. The team ran into all kinds of magical beasts. Goblins, wild forest boars, even gray-furred wolves. No creature was spared, not even burrowing rats. The party left nothing behind. A few days later, deep within a dimly lit part of the forest, an adventuring party advanced carefully. Their formation seemed loose, but in reality, it was very well organized. At the front was a knight with sword and shield. In the middle were a mage, an archer, and an assassin. A warrior guarded the rear. Isn't this forest supposed to have more than just goblins? One of them asked casually. Goblins were weak, so the team was relaxed. We're just at the border. High-level monsters are rare here. Despite the words, the team captain, peeking, remained vigilant. His eyes constantly scanned the dense forest ahead. The goblin forest had always been a mysterious place. Humans only dared to explore the outer 100-kilometer range. Many powerful factions had sent in elite parties to investigate it. None returned. Even high-ranking adventurers sent to rescue them disappeared without a trace. Over time, Goblin Forest became known as a forbidden zone. Goblins might be weak, but they were incredibly valuable. No creature on the continent could completely eliminate goblin traces. Goblin ears, in particular, were top-tier materials used in purification alchemy. That's why so many adventurers risked their lives hunting goblins here. Captain, I found goblin tracks. The archer suddenly crouched down. She brushed a tiny footprint on the ground, then sniffed her mud-covered fingers. The entire party halted and looked at her. Eileen stood, her gaze shifting toward the deeper parts of the forest. That way. The scent's strong. Must be close. The group picked up the pace, heading deeper in the indicated direction. But soon after they left, a green-skinned figure slipped out from the trees. It was Li Ming, now fully evolved into a hobgoblin. Smells like my kin. Looks like the adventurers found their next target. Li Ming grinned viciously and followed after them. Not long after, deep within the forest. Damn it, why is it a terror bear? The team had found goblins, but the goblins were already being devoured by a massive bear-like beast. It towered over 3 meters tall. Right now, it was chewing on a goblin like it was popcorn. Roar! The terror bear noticed the intruders. Compared to goblins, humans were a far tastier snack. It spat out the mangled goblin and let out a deafening roar. Then, like a walking mountain of muscle, it charged the adventurers. Peeking's face turned grim. This was a mid-tier magical beast, and they were just a low-tier party. Odyssey with me. Martha, prep your spells. Lacher, stay back and protect Martha and Eileen. As team leader, Peking didn't hesitate. He issued orders instantly and charged the terror bear, sword and shield in hand. The assassin, Odyssey, darted into the shadows. His job wasn't to fight head-on. He would wait, hidden in the dark, for a perfect moment to strike. In the gloom of the forest, Peking closed the distance. The terror bear struck first, swinging its massive paw at him. If it landed, even a high-level adventurer would be flattened in a paste. Peking raised his shield at the perfect moment. Clang! The bear's paw slammed into the shield. The impact sent Peking sliding back over 10 meters, feet carving lines into the soil. Huh, come on, you beast. Let's dance. His wrist throbbed with pain, but he grinned, taunting the beast. That was his job. As a knight, he had to hold its attention. That would give the rear line members space to attack. Roar! The terror bear fell for it. Its brain was too simple to multitask in battle. It roared again and charged. Whoosh! Suddenly, an arrow whooshed past Peking's side. From the rear, Eileen had drawn her bow and fired a flaming arrow. In that split second when the arrow left the bowstring, it burst into roaring flames. It transformed into a blazing streak of fire that zipped past Peking's side, slicing through the air as it homed in on the Earthshaker bear. The flame arrow struck dead on, right between the creature's eyes. At the edge of the starry void, a solitary figure stood, cloaked in sorrow. With his back to the heavens and earth, ashes drifting around him like snow, he whispered a mournful lament. Time rushes on. The ancient ways fade. 10,000 paths fall into ruin. Who will mourn for all the worlds of the heavens? Boom! With a sharp blast, the fire arrow exploded on impact. Flames instantly engulfed the head of the Earthshock bear. But its thick hide and dense muscle gave it terrifying resistance. The blast only managed to scorch the fur on its forehead. Enraged by the pain, the Earthshock bear went berserk. Instead of continuing its assault on Peking, it turned and charged toward the back line, toward Eileen. Drink! A loud shout suddenly echoed through the forest. Peking, noticing the bear ignoring him, reacted fast. He shouted with all his might, sending a shockwave of sound that stabbed into the bear's eardrums. It flinched, almost like it had been mocked, and turned its fury back on him. Is that a taunt skill? Hidden in the northern brush, a green-skinned figure observed the battle quietly. It was Li Ming, from the thick bushes. Li Ming watched the adventurer team fight the Earthshock bear with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Knights, warriors, mages, archers, assassins. The fight looked more like a live-action RPG session. He focused his thoughts and scanned the monster stats. Earthshock bear. Level, 61. Strength, 214. Defense, 251. Agility, 127. Magic, 7. Ironhide. Greatly increases defense. Savage roar. Emits a powerful roar that can mentally stun enemies. Its physical stats were nothing short of insane. But high stats didn't necessarily mean high combat power. The knight in the adventurer squad, who had only around 50 points average in attributes, fought the bear with smooth, experienced movements. He never directly clashed with the bear's attacks. Even though the bear was technically faster, its massive body made it less agile than the heavily armored knight. The bigger the size, the more agility it needed to stay mobile. For a beast that size to move like a cat, it would have needed at least 3 times its current agility. Li Ming shifted his gaze toward another bush nearby, where the team's assassin was hiding. Captain, move! Suddenly, the battle shifted again. In the rear, Martha raised her staff and began chanting. At the top of the staff, a swirling fireball started forming, growing bigger, spinning faster. The air around it shimmered with heat. Waves of intense energy rolled outward. Eileen and Lei Chier instinctively stepped back several paces. As Martha finished chanting, she let out a soft cry. Peking's face changed instantly. He leapt backward, then lunged left, disengaging from combat just in time. At that very moment, Martha swung her staff forward. A Tier 2 spell, Explosive Fireball, shot out and roared toward the Earthshock bear. The half-meter-wide fireball tore through the air like a missile. The bear, just about to chase Peking, ran headfirst into it. Crockum! The fireball hit squarely, triggering a thunderous explosion. A fiery mushroom cloud rose slowly above the treetops. A wave of flames and shockwaves erupted in all directions. The Earthshock bear was swallowed whole by the inferno. A 30-meter radius around the blast was scorched clean. Peking, thrown back by the blast, crashed over 10 meters away. When things finally settled, he staggered to his feet, dazed and filthy. Martha, did you really have to use a Tier 2 spell? He spit out a mouthful of dirt, glaring at her half annoyed, half exasperated. Martha had a habit of using ridiculously powerful magic. Sure, it worked, but it drained her mana like crazy. Peking glanced toward where the bear had stood. A massive crater, more than 10 meters wide, now scarred the ground. Inside lay the smoldering, broken body of the Earthshock bear. Its fur was completely burned off, and its head was a gory mess. Captain, that was an Earthshock bear. A mid-tier, grade 3 magic beast. Jackpot, Eileen said with a grin. Grade 3 monster cores sold for a fortune. A flawless one could fetch 10 gold coins. That alone was half a year's income from most adventurers. Eileen, Marta, Lankier, and Peking gathered around the crater, smiling at their prize. I'll handle the core extraction. Peking chuckled, drawing his long sword and approaching the corpse. Roar! Suddenly, the charred Earthshock bear snapped open its bloodshot eyes. With a final screech, it raised one massive claw and swiped at Peking. Captain, watch out! Eileen screamed. In that heart-stopping moment, a shadow flashed in from the side. With blinding speed, it rammed into the bear. Slash! A sharp dagger pierced clean through its skull. The beast collapsed with a heavy thud. Odyssey stood calmly on top of the corpse, pulling his dagger free and wiping off the blood. Captain, you taught us to never approach a beast before confirming it's dead. Peking scratched his head awkwardly, chuckling. I guess I got a little too excited. Thanks, Odyssey. You saved my hide. The team got to work dismembering the bear. Its burnt fur wasn't worth anything, so they skipped skinning it. But the claws, teeth, and bones were precious forging materials. These guys, there's no way they're just rookies. Li Meng whispered from his hiding spot in the deeper woods. He watched them carve open the bear's carcass, his eyes full of dread. His frail body shrank back further into the bush. If they spotted him, he'd be dead for sure. Adventurers like that wouldn't hesitate to kill him and take his ears as trophies. With his current power, he wouldn't even get a chance to scream before they obliterated him. Half an hour passed before the team finally left, leaving behind only the mangled, gutted body of the Earthshock bear. Their footsteps slowly faded into the forest. Li Meng still didn't move. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. 30 minutes later, footsteps returned. Eileen, you're being way too paranoid. Lei Chier gave her a helpless glance, clearly not sharing the same level of suspicion. Eileen, however, kept her eyes fixed on the massive corpse of the Earth bear lying in the crater before them. There was a flicker of doubt in her gaze. Was it just her imagination? For the past few days, she'd had this unshakable feeling, like something was following them, watching, lurking just beyond sight. And Eileen wasn't one to ignore a feeling like that. As an archer, her instincts were everything. And if there was one thing she'd learned over the years, it was to never, ever doubt them. The captain's still waiting on us. Let's move. Yeah, let's go. The two of them turned and disappeared into the depths of the forest. Soon, even the sound of their footsteps faded completely. Hidden in a dense thicket, Li Meng was drenched in cold sweat. Women's instincts, scary as hell. Just moments ago, he'd nearly lost control and lunged out to devour a chunk of meat. Luckily, he'd forcibly suppressed that overwhelming hunger. Sure enough, that woman had come back to double-check. Li Meng didn't budge. He needed to wait a bit longer. The earlier commotion had startled nearby birds and beasts into scattering. For now, the fresh scent of blood from the Earth Demon Bear wouldn't attract other monsters too quickly. 2 hours later, Li Meng finally slipped out of the bush under cover of silence. The thick, iron-scented blood made his eyes go blood-red. With a roll, he dove into the large crater. Then, pouncing onto the Earth Demon Bear's corpse, he began to devour it with a frenzy. His sharp teeth worked like small blades, tearing off chunk after chunk of juicy flesh. The sound of gnawing echoed through the forest, chilling to the bone. To consume the Earth Demon Bear in the shortest time possible, Li Meng gorged like a starved beast. He wolfed down everything, hair, hide, organs, stuffing it all into his mouth without a second thought. His small belly seemed like a bottomless pit. Even after eating a fifth of the massive bear's body, he still didn't look bloated. As he devoured like a madman, a hot wave of energy surged through his body. Bones creaked and popped. A sharp tingling sensation occasionally shot through his limbs. His jaw widened unnaturally, allowing him to rip off even bigger hunks of meat. So good, so good, Li Meng mumbled through bloodied lips, his face twisted with madness. He could no longer tell what was fresh or foul. Everything just tasted divine. He was utterly lost in a frenzy of flesh and blood. All he wanted now was to devour every last bit of meat in front of him. From above, you could see that the once scrawny goblin had grown shockingly muscular. His bloated belly was gone, replaced by a thick, solid core. His limbs bulged with muscle. He had grown to a staggering height of over 2.5 meters. His skin seemed to writhe as if something was crawling beneath it. It was a grotesque, terrifying sight, enough to make your scalp go numb. He kept eating and eating. Only when he had consumed every last scrap of the Earth Demon Bear's corpse did he finally stop. Staring at the pile of white bones before him, Li Meng looked shaken, torn between fear and ecstasy. The high of that gluttonous frenzy was addictive. Smack! Li Meng slapped himself hard across the face. The blow left his green skin flushed red. The pain snapped him back to reality. Huff! He took a deep breath and looked down at his own body. His jaw dropped. His arms and legs were no longer skinny. Thick muscle bulged across his entire frame. Even his once loose animal skin had torn, barely hanging on his rags. He stood nearly 3 meters tall. With a flick of thought, he opened his status screen. Name, Li Meng. Race, Goblin Warrior. Level, 41. Strength, 223. Defense, 274. Agility, 185. Magic, 75. Rapid reproduction. 20 offspring per birth. 1 goblin equals a full squad. Rapid growth. As long as there's enough food, your offspring will evolve quickly. Genetic enhancement. Your children will always be goblins, but inherit the other parent's talents and enhanced potential. The stronger the mate, the greater the offspring's potential. Plunder talent. After mating, you will randomly acquire 1 skill from your partner. Gluttonous devourer. Eating flesh and blood enhances your attributes. A goblin warrior? Li Meng stared at the screen, a mix of fear and delight on his face. Who would have thought devouring an Earth Demon Bear would cause him to evolve straight past a level tier? There were 6 evolutionary stages for goblins. Goblin, Hobgoblin, Goblin Fighter, Goblin Warrior, Goblin Chieftain, Goblin King. Each stage corresponded roughly to levels 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, and 150. And not only had he evolved past the tier, but his stats were absurdly high. Could he have absorbed the Earth Demon Bear's stats? He glanced at the pile of bones again, hesitating. Normally, a Goblin Warrior wouldn't have such crazy numbers. Goblins were supposed to be the weakest magical creatures in this world. Whoosh! Suddenly, a crisis. A sharp whistling sound came from behind. A dark streak shot out of the forest and struck him square in the back. It was an arrow, with a white feathered tail and razor-sharp head that embedded itself deep in his flesh. He had guessed that the adventurer squad might return, but the life simulation hadn't predicted it would happen so soon. Pain stabbed into his spine as he turned to look behind him. When he saw the figures emerging from the forest, Li Meng's eyes narrowed. Leichier, you believe me now? My instincts never fail, said Eileen, eyes narrowing at the green giant in the pit. The others stared in disbelief at the massive goblin. A goblin warrior? Eileen, don't tell me this thing's been tailing us and feeding on the corpses we left behind. Martha couldn't believe what she was seeing. Only a goblin warrior could be that huge. When the goblin turned to face them, both Eileen and Martha blushed slightly. Ugh, gross, Martha hissed. The goblin wasn't wearing a thing, and that thing was swinging free right in front of them. Martha turned her head away, face red. The guys behind them all snickered quietly. Piking, with sword and shield in hand, stepped forward as the team's vanguard. Not worth much, but hey, a monster's a monster. Let's clean this up and head back. The others nodded, relaxed. It was just a lone goblin warrior. Sure, for newbie adventurers this might have been trouble, but they were seasoned veterans, just a step below elite. There were no other goblins in the area. 1 stray warrior? No need for all 5 to jump in. Piking and Eileen alone would be more than enough to deal with it. But as the squad closed in, Li Meng grinned, a feral, savage smile. Run? Not this time. Now they'd see what a smart, evolved goblin warrior could do. His eyes flicked briefly toward the 2 female adventurers. Voluptuous. Just my type. Li Meng shrugged his shoulders. The arrow lodged in his back was forcibly pushed out by his muscles. It dropped to the ground, and the 5 adventurers couldn't believe their eyes. Their expressions instantly changed. They all sensed a powerful aura emanating from the goblin warrior. A powerful aura? How is that possible? It was just a goblin warrior. Li Meng curled his fingers and beckoned them with a taunting motion. That provocative gesture made their eyes flicker with disbelief. Goblins didn't do that. They normally saw humans the way humans saw mountains of gold, rushing in with the sole goal of devouring them alive. Get ready to fight. Eileen, Martha, kill it. Peking raised his sword and shield, stepping forward with a grim look. He issued the attack order. Odyssey turned and vanished into the forest without a trace. As a group shifted slightly, Li Meng launched the first move. He pulled out his right hand, which had been hidden behind his back. In his hand was a solid rock. Li Meng grinned wickedly and stepped forward. Then, with a textbook throwing motion, "Who said I have to fight you hand to hand? Modern man from Earth, here to teach you the might of a well-thrown stone." Li Meng hurled the rock with all his strength. The moment it left his hand, a burst of energy exploded around it. The stone turned into a streak of black light, whistling toward the night, leading the adventurers. Li Meng had considered attacking the two female adventurers. They posed the greatest threat. But he couldn't kill them. Alive, they were far more valuable. What the hell? Seeing the goblin warrior holding a rock, and even striking a strange pose, Peking got an uneasy feeling. What happened next proved his instincts were dead on. A sharp whistling pierced the air. Peking raised his shield purely on reflex. The projectile was too fast. There was no time to cast his shield wall skill. Bang! The rock slammed into Peking's shield with a deafening crash. He felt a massive force hit him like a truck. His entire body was thrown backward, right into Martha, who had just started chanting a spell. The two of them crashed to the ground in a tangled heap. Eileen, cover me. Leitier hadn't expected a goblin warrior to use rock throwing as a combat technique, and with such terrifying accuracy. She shouted and charged toward him with her greatsword. Eileen gritted her teeth and drew her bow. Flip! An arrow zipped through the air, heading straight for Li Meng. But flame-based spells needed charge time, and in the chaos of battle, Eileen didn't have any. She had to stop the goblin warrior from throwing another stone. Li Meng didn't dodge. He raised his arm to block. Thwack! The arrow struck the back of his hand. Eileen gasped. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Since when did goblins get this smart? The pain made Li Meng grimace. He crouched and grabbed another suitable rock from the ground. Another perfect overhand throw. Another burst of energy. Another stone shot forward, shrieking through the air. At the same moment Li Meng released it. Leitier veered sharply to the left. But the wind pressure from the stone slammed into her face like a hammer. Everything went dark. She collapsed backward. Blood gushed from beneath her body like a fountain. Captain, Leitier is dead. She's dead. The team leader and Martha were already unconscious. What kind of strength could knock out both of them like that? Li Meng had merely predicted the fighter's movement, and it worked. His simulated life prediction system had proven itself once again. From the outside, it looked like that adventurer had intentionally caught the rock with her face. Li Meng clenched the rock in his hand until it crumbled. He kept only a small piece. Hey, human girl, how's the view from down there? He took a big, slow step forward, approaching her without hurry. His voice rang out, loud and full of confidence. Eileen froze. She turned her head and stared in disbelief. The goblin was walking toward her. Ugly, horrifying, monstrous. But he'd just spoken. Human language? No, no way. I must be dreaming. She inhaled deeply, trying to wake herself up. If this is a dream, let me wake up now. You're not seriously thinking this is all a dream, are you? That ugly goblin's voice rang out again. He crouched on the ground, holding his head, muttering to himself. Then, he stood and walked right up to Eileen. Li Meng dropped the small stone in front of her. Eileen collapsed to the ground, her body completely limp. There was meat. Naturally, the next step was to eat. Why don't I feel sick or disgusted by this? A trace of confusion flickered in Li Meng's eyes. Even he was stunned by his own body's terrifying adaptability. Could it be that his physical instincts had overpowered his rational mind? Screw it. As long as I can grow stronger, who cares? Li Meng smirked and shook the random thoughts out of his head. There is no shame in simply following one's instincts, especially not when your life was on the line. Li Meng knew he didn't have a luxury of choice. He was a goblin, an ugly goblin, and in this world, goblins were like rats on Earth. Everyone wanted them dead, monsters that needed to be exterminated. All he wanted was to survive. That was it. You have leveled up. Current level, 43. The system notification made Li Meng curl his lip. Was it because he was still too weak? He got up and walked toward Eileen and Martha. He already knew their names, thanks to the system's simulated life mode. When he reached them, he squatted down and hoisted one girl on each shoulder. Let's go. Ha ha. Li Meng let out a hearty laugh. He carried the unconscious Eileen and Martha deeper into the forest. He had to change the future, one that ended in his death. Li Meng had made up his mind. It was time to relocate, find a new place to settle down. He had no idea how that adventurer squad managed to track him in the first place. But it likely had something to do with that fleeing assassin. Too bad that bastard was slippery as hell. Even knowing the future didn't help him deal with that assassin. Not one bit. The moment the fighting started, that guy had already vanished into the forest. His signal on the system would appear 1 second and vanish the next. It was probably some kind of stealth mode that even the system couldn't lock onto. Should I find a cave or something? As he trudged through the dim forest, carrying the two girls effortlessly, Li Meng mulled over his options. Goblins seemed to prefer dark, damp caves. But not him. He liked the sunlight, the open air. Then, after a while, the sound of flowing water reached his ears. Soon, the trees opened up and the view ahead widened. Li Meng emerged from the forest and found himself at the edge of a stream. In front of him flowed a small but steady river. Could this be the same river the life simulation mentioned? He looked around, taking in the scene. It was beautiful, and most importantly, it had easy access to water. Let's keep heading upstream. Roughly 2 hours later, Li Meng found the source of the stream. It led to a massive lake. The lake was huge, its far edge out of sight. And at the center of it all was a giant island. A single colossal tree stood on the island, stretching high into the sky. The tree had to be at least 500 meters tall. Its canopy was so dense, it practically blocked out the sun. Dongji. Standing there at the water's edge, Li Meng didn't let himself get distracted by the majestic view. Instead, he felt a deep and creeping sense of dread. Still carrying the unconscious Eileen and Martha, he turned and ran, without hesitation. Not long after he left, the calm waters near the lake's center began to churn. A massive shape rose from the depths. A giant dragon's head broke the surface. So huge, it looked like a small mountain. Just one golden eye was the size of a carriage wheel. Beneath the water, its shadow stretched even wider. It was like an entire mountain lay hidden beneath the lake's surface, easily over 300 meters in diameter. The dragon's enormous head scanned its surroundings. It sniffed the air, then blinked, an oddly human-like flicker of confusion in its eyes. A goblin had actually dared come near the God-Eye Lake. Meanwhile, downriver, Li Meng was still sprinting like mad with Eileen and Martha slung over his shoulders. Holy crap, whatever's in that lake is something seriously terrifying. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. He couldn't help but shudder. His eyes shone with both fear and relief. Note to self, never mess with the future timeline lightly. If he hadn't followed the simulated future's warning, he could have died, just like that. Even if the future he saw always ended in death. The timing of when he changed the future, that was the real game changer. After about half an hour of full speed running, Li Meng finally stopped near the riverbank. Phew, he took a deep breath. Quit faking. I know you're both awake. He could feel the slight trembling in their soft bodies. Sure enough, Eileen and Martha slowly opened their eyes. They exchanged a look, and in that moment, both pairs of eyes were filled with despair. Goblin, what did you do to our captain? Eileen couldn't help asking, even though she already knew the answer. She's bones now. Want me to show you? Their faces turned pale. What do you want from us? Despite the pain and despair flooding her heart, Eileen remained calm. She was an adventurer, after all, no stranger to life and death. Just because she was hurting didn't mean she'd lose her mind. The goblin hadn't killed them yet, which meant there was still a chance, no matter how slim, to survive. You're adventurers. You should know goblins well by now. What do you think I want? Both women's faces turned completely ashen. Right? He was a goblin. Goblins had no females of their own. They reproduced by using females from other species. Whether monsters or humans, it didn't matter. As long as the victim was female, goblins could reproduce. But that process was horrifying. Even while still in the womb, goblin embryos would greedily consume their host nutrients. The host would grow increasingly weak, their body deteriorating. And once the goblin was born, it would immediately eat the first meat it saw, which of course was the mother. Too weak to resist, she would die instantly. That's why goblins were universally hated by humans and monsters alike. They were creatures meant to be exterminated. Li Meng glanced around. Then he turned and walked into the eastern woods. Do you want to survive? Somehow, Li Meng instinctively knew how goblins reproduced, as if the body he now inhabited carried that knowledge. Eileen turned to Martha. Martha stayed silent, her eyes fixed on a magic staff hanging from the goblin's waist. Eileen shook her head. A mage needed time to cast a spell. If the goblin noticed Martha preparing anything, she'd be dead before the first incantation left her lips. Martha noticed Eileen signaling to her. Eileen subtly gestured for her to stay calm and not act impulsively. Think. We want to live, Eileen said firmly. Though there was a flicker of humiliation in her eyes, something hard to detect unless you were paying close attention. To survive, they had no choice but to obey the goblin. For adventurers like them, that was the ultimate disgrace. Then give birth to my offspring, the goblin sneered. Who knows? That assassin who ran off might bring someone to rescue you. Odyssey's still alive? That possibility made Eileen and Martha's eyes light up. There was something unmistakable in their expression. Hope. For you to reproduce, how exactly does that help us survive? Eileen snapped. What difference did it make? Bearing a goblin spawn or just dying? She caught the contradiction in the goblin's logic. Then maybe, the goblin grinned. You'll soon see a goblin who speaks human. Li Ming's ugly face twisted into a cruel smile. He'd only been acting polite to manipulate Eileen and Martha into cooperating with him. All he needed was for them to compromise, just enough to avoid unnecessary trouble. Eileen and Martha exchanged uneasy glances. This goblin was strange, not just because it could speak human language, but because it spoke with an eerie sense of reason. Heavens above. What the hell is going on? My offspring won't hurt you, the goblin said matter-of-factly. You'll just be weak for a few days. And why should we trust you? Eileen challenged. You don't have a choice. Stop fighting it. If you resist, it'll only make things worse. You might even die after giving birth because your body's too weak. When did I become like this? Li Ming suddenly found himself questioning everything. It had only been 4 days since he arrived in this world. Just 4 days, and he was already used to being goblin. It was as if doing something this vile had become completely normal. Was it fear of death? This world was a dark fantasy nightmare. It reminded him of those immortal cultivation novels back on Earth, where only the strong survive and the weak are treated like insects. To a powerful being, killing the weak took no more thought than squashing a bug. Being forced to entrust your fate to someone else, it was maddening. Here's good enough, he muttered, after scanning the area. Like usual. Now, the captain was dead. Rachel was dead. Only Odyssey had escaped, and they'd been captured. What hurt the most was the realization. They were about to become goblin breeding stock. Don't think about running, the goblin said casually. I won't chase you. Sure, mages could still cast spells without a staff, but it slowed their chance and weakened their spells. As for Eileen, a bow user, she was even more helpless. Worse, neither woman had the strength to defend herself. If they didn't get more than 5 kilometers out, the monsters crawling all over this forest would kill them in minutes. Where are you going? Eileen asked, alarmed as she saw the goblin walking deeper into the forest. You'll still see me. I'm staying nearby, Li Ming said. He stopped at a medium-sized tree. The trees in this forest were massive. It wasn't easy to find one of smaller size. Even so, this small tree was still thick enough that it would take an adult to wrap their arms around it. Li Ming raised a massive axe, taken from one of the adventurers, and swung hard the trunk. Crack! With a loud snap, the tree fell to the ground. A chorus of cracking and rustling followed as nearby creatures stirred. Li Ming glanced at the axe blade and grinned. Not a bad axe, he muttered, despite using it so violently. The blade hadn't dulled. That would make the next part easier. Eileen and Martha watched him curiously as the goblin began chopping trees with surprising skill and strength. He moved fast. Even the thicker trunks only took a few swings to bring down. Soon, he had cleared a large area around them. Then he began stripping branches, trimming the trunks, and stacking the logs. Martha, is he really just a goblin warrior? Eileen whispered. His strength was terrifying. Even elite human warriors wouldn't be able to chop down such large trees with so few strikes. I don't know, Martha replied, her legs trembling. She stumbled back and collapsed against a large tree. Eileen looked down at her for a moment, then quietly sat beside her. The two of them had more or less accepted their fate. What's he doing? Eileen asked after a while. Looks like he's building a nest. You mean a wooden house? Yeah, I think so. Eileen stared at the goblin, stunned. Since when did goblins know how to build wooden houses? And he looked experienced, like this wasn't his first time doing it. But Eileen might have been wrong. This was Li Ming's first time building one. Back on Earth, he'd loved watching survival shows, especially those about living on deserted islands. The first thing the contestants always did was build a shelter to protect against wind and rain. He might not have built one before, but he'd watched plenty of people do it. Even if he'd never eaten pork, he'd seen pigs run. Time passed. Unknowingly, 5 hours slipped by. The sun set. Darkness covered the land. Just before nightfall, Li Ming finally finished gathering all the wood he needed. He stacked the thick logs into a massive pile and lit campfires on either side. Then, he deliberately separated Eileen and Martha. Martha, you go over there, he said, pointing to the far side of the woodpile. How did the goblin know her name? Had he been following them all along, listening to their conversations? Martha glanced at Eileen, then walked away toward the second fire. Li Meng watched her swaying figure disappear into the shadows and chuckled. Eileen, come with me. We're heading to the other fire. Eileen's eyes dimmed. A trace of despair flickered inside them. Still, she had no choice but to follow. They reached the fire, and Li Meng pointed to a bearskin spread on the ground beside it. It was only a quarter of a full pelt, but it was big enough. The rest of it was draped over his own shoulders. So he said, "Want me to help you undress?" Eileen's eyes flickered with disgust. With a resigned sigh, she began to take off her leather armor. Looks like this world isn't as primitive as I thought when it comes to weaving tech. The leather armor she wore was quite refined, not something a primitive culture could produce. It was nighttime. The forest around them was quiet. Only 2 campfires flickered in the darkness, the crackling of dry with the only sound breaking the silence. Martha sat next to one of the fires, looking distracted. She kept glancing nervously at the pile of logs across from her. But since a while ago, all noise from that direction had stopped. Just earlier, she could still hear the guttural yells of the goblin. Now, nothing. A trace of fear flashed across Martha's eyes. She knew exactly what the goblin was doing to Eileen, but there was nothing she could do. Sitting there, Martha clutched her ears tightly, her whole body trembling. Every moment that passed was pure torment. She didn't know how much time had gone by. Just as she was about to doze off, she suddenly jerked awake, her body snapping to attention. Eyes wide with worry, she looked toward the flickering flames by the log pile. As her mind raced with worry, a large, towering figure emerged from behind the logs. It was the goblin. Martha's eyes showed a hint of panic. What did you do to Eileen? Mustering her courage, Martha confronted Limong, her concern for Eileen giving her strength. Limong walked casually toward the fire. What do you think? She passed out. If you're so worried, go check on her. Without hesitation, Martha got up and rushed toward the other side of the logs. Don't make me wait too long. The goblin's voice behind her made her soft body tremble. But she didn't stop. She ran on. Moments later, Martha returned. Her face was flushed, her eyes filled with complex emotions. She had never seen Eileen like that before. Her face was full of hatred, unwillingness, and a helpless acceptance. In the end, Eileen had even told her not to resist the goblin. That as long as they were alive, one day, they'd be free. But beyond that, Martha noticed something else. When Eileen spoke about the goblin, her expression was complicated. There was something strange about it, something Martha couldn't put into words. It unsettled her. What? See? I didn't lie, did I? Back by the fire, Martha said nothing. Come here. Limong, sitting cross-legged by the flames, patted his leg. With a look of despair, Martha slowly walked toward him. Time passed. The night deepened. At the second campfire, not far away, Eileen lay on a bearskin, staring up at the star-filled sky in a daze. She could hear faint noises from the direction of the logs. Martha might be timid, but sometimes she had surprising courage. Just earlier, she kept her mouth covered, but she was also surprisingly carefree. Eileen didn't even realize when the sounds from the other side had stopped, because at some point, she'd fallen asleep. By the time she woke the next morning, the sun was already high in the sky. Wrapped in the bearskin, she felt warm. The sunlight on her face was a little too bright, though. Not far away, she heard the steady thwack of wood being chopped. Eileen threw off the bearskin and stood up, quietly putting her armor back on. Eileen, you're awake. Martha came over just as Eileen was fastening her armor. Their eyes met, and both girls looked awkward. Only they knew what that awkwardness was really about. What's that in your hands? Eileen finally asked. She noticed Martha carrying a basket woven from vines. Hungry? I roasted some meat earlier. Martha sat down by the fire, setting the basket beside her. Eileen joined her. She was hungry. Martha pulled out a roasted piece of meat about the size of a palm and handed it to her. Eileen took it and started eating. Not bad. What kind of meat is this? Then, as if realizing something, her face paled. It's mole meat. The goblin caught it while chopping wood. Martha's answer made Eileen sigh in relief. She dug in with more enthusiasm. In no time, she'd finished the first piece. Just as she was reaching for another, she noticed Martha staring blankly toward the goblin in the distance, who was building a wooden house. He was working on the foundation, an area of land that had been cleared and leveled into a large square. One corner even had a deep, deep pit. The foundation was massive, several times larger than the average villager's wooden house. Martha, what is it? Eileen pulled out another half-palm-sized piece of roasted meat from the basket. I still on her friend. Martha shook her head. It's nothing, just that it feels a bit strange. Strange. Eileen's mind drifted to the experience from last night. Her cheeks flushed red. What do you mean by strange? Don't you think it didn't act like a goblin? Not like a goblin? Eileen glanced at the goblin pounding away at a wooden stake nearby. What do you mean not like a goblin? It's ugly from head to toe. I meant its behavior. Behavior? Eileen looked at the goblin again. Now, that Martha mentioned it. It'd seem odd. At the very least, Eileen had never heard of a goblin speaking human language. And it wasn't just speech, it was fluent. Every move it made didn't feel as crude or wild as a goblin should. Even last night, when it tormented her, it had been unusually gentle. That strange gentleness made everything feel even more terrifying. Realizing this, Eileen trembled slightly. While Eileen and Martha were whispering about Limong, Limong was listening from afar. He didn't want to eavesdrop. His hearing was just too sharp. Even though the women weren't speaking loudly, he could still hear every word. Looks like I gained 2 new skills last night. Last night, when Limong did the deed, the system had given him notifications he hadn't paid attention to. He willed his character interface to appear. Name, Limong. Race, Goblin Warrior. Level, 43. Strength, 243. Defense, 296. Agility, 204. Magic power, 81. Super rapid breeding. 1 pregnancy results in 20 offspring. A single goblin can form an entire army. Accelerated growth. Offspring evolve rapidly as long as they have enough food. Genetic enhancement. Offspring born from mating will inherit goblin form, but also inherit and enhance traits of the mother. The stronger the mother, the higher the potential of the child. Talent theft. When mating, there's a chance to copy one of the female's abilities for yourself. Devourer, gluttony. Eating flesh and blood boosts your attributes. Flame arrow. Fires an arrow engulfed in flames that causes a small explosion on impact. Explosive fireball. Art is explosion. Used with caution at close range. Not bad. Both skills were quite practical. After skimming the rest, Limong closed the interface and got back to work. His goal for today was to finish preparing the base. By tomorrow, he could start building the first level of the wooden house. Time flew by. Soon it was noon. By the campfire, the 3 of them sat across from one another, silently eating grilled meat. I need rope. Do either of you know how to make it using tree bark? Limong suddenly turned to ask Eileen and Martha. The 2 women exchanged glances. Do they dare say no? Martha turned toward him and nodded quickly. All right, this afternoon, you'll stay here and make rope from bark. I'm going into the forest to look for supplies. I'll be back before nightfall. Limong took the staff from his waist and handed it to Martha. Since the women would be staying behind, they needed to be able to protect themselves. Even a wild boar from the forest could take them out if they were unarmed. As for whether they could escape, no chance. Both Eileen and Martha were already pregnant. Goblin pregnancies only lasted half a month. As long as they'd done that, there was no doubt about it. Once impregnated, a female couldn't abort a goblin child unless she died herself. Even if they wanted to run, both women were beginning to develop a strange feeling of security. Judging from their clothing, this world's civilization didn't seem primitive at all. Eileen's leather armor was finely crafted. Martha stared in disbelief at the dying campfire. Limong's eyes flashed with surprise. Could this world be different from the typical fantasy world he imagined? Eileen was an archer who could shoot flaming arrows. Everything pointed to this being a world of magic. Limong kept questioning Martha by the fire. Martha's voice continued steadily. She paused for a moment. Otherwise, how could she know so much about 500 years of human history? Some say that goblins are on the same level as the Dragon King, Moked Mole. Their corpses are so terrifying that even the dead won't approach them. Whether that's true, I don't know. Limong thought of the terrifying presence in that lake. If even the dead avoid the goblin forest, why don't humans settle here? A dumb question, if you were from this world. Some tried. In the last 300 years, there have been 5 attempts. The first ended with over 100,000 deaths, every settlement erased from the map. The second saw 30,000 dead in one night. The third happened much later during a boom in colonization. Dozens of settlements popped up, only to have hundreds of thousands die mysteriously in their sleep one night. After that, humans gave up trying. The fourth time was 70 years ago. A 1,000-man expedition tried to establish a long-term base. One night, their entire camp was destroyed by mysterious magical creatures. None survived. Limong smirked coldly. They were just poking the bear, testing the limits of something far more powerful. I'll go now. If there's danger, climb a tree. If it's something you can't fight, shoot a spell into the sky. I won't go far. I'll come back quickly. He now knew what he needed from Martha. In short, this world was in the midst of a catastrophe. Limong stood up, watching the tall figure of the goblin fade into the distance. Martha turned to Eileen, visibly unsettled. What's wrong? Eileen asked. Martha, should we run? This might be our only chance. Martha gave a bitter smile. She looked down at Eileen's belly. Maybe we're not pregnant yet. Martha stared at Eileen seriously. Do you actually believe that? I don't know. Martha, why don't you ever know anything? Can't you just tell me what you really think? What do you want me to say? That we're doomed? What good would that do? I don't know. I just wanted to hear how you really feel. She was just trying to release the pressure building up inside. I'm sorry. I'm just really scared. The thought that she might be carrying a goblin child made Eileen feel sick. A growing, inexplicable fear gnawed at her. Martha shook her head. It's okay. I'm scared too. Eileen, let's survive together. One day, we'll escape this place. But Limong wasn't interested in spying on them anymore. He was looking for a plant called bamboo. If he could find it, he could start making bowls and pots, and finally eat some real cooked food. Weird. Why is this place so barren? About a kilometer away from camp, his view suddenly opened up. Before him was a clearing in the middle of the forest. Not large, maybe 500 to 600 meters across. Even the soil seemed to be hardening unnaturally. In the center stood a massive, withered tree. 10 people holding hands still wouldn't be able to circle around it. It was clearly withering at an alarming rate. And yet, the flower buds looked strangely radiant, almost ethereal. Trent, level 154. Defense, 417. Agility, 0. Mana, 1017. Root bind. Uses its roots to entangle enemies. Weaken pollen. Blooms to release a pollen that causes targets to fall into a weakened state. That was the intel the system provided on the massive tree. Li Meng froze in place. He didn't dare take another step forward. The Trant didn't react. It hadn't noticed him yet. Apparently, he hadn't entered its attack range. The nutrients in the soil pouch must have already been absorbed by the Trant. Suddenly, a thought struck him, and a grin spread across Li Meng's face. Even Bong Lo's ugly mug lit up with excitement. All right then, let's test out just how powerful my exploding fireball spell really is. A Trant that couldn't move? That was basically a stationary target for a mage. Li Meng extended his right hand. Even if someone heard what he was chanting, they wouldn't understand it. In the next instant, space around him began to warp. Flames erupted out of nowhere. The fire continued to flare, feeding into a growing fireball. The fireball swelled larger and larger with each passing moment. Magic might have levels, sure, but you paid for it in mana cost. Right now, Li Meng had only one thing on his mind: bigger. The fireball grew rapidly, its color deepening from orange to a dark, menacing red. Shit, why does it feel like I'm losing control of this thing? Right as his mana was about to run dry, Li Meng realized he really was losing control of the fireball. If he didn't release it now, it would explode in his face. He immediately cut off the spell's buildup. With a loud roar, he let it loose. The blinding, exploding fireball shot out like a wild horse freed from its reins. It moved so fast it left only a flicker of flame in its wake. As it tore through the air, the surrounding atmosphere warped from the sheer heat. The burning fireball crashed down like a meteor from the sky, striking the Trant dead on. More than half of the Trent's massive body was engulfed in flames in an instant. Boom! The explosion roared like thunder, shaking the heavens. The earth trembled across a radius of dozens of kilometers. Back at the edge of the wasteland, Li Meng had to brace himself as a powerful shockwave, carrying dirt and dust, swept toward him. He instinctively stepped back several paces. Meanwhile, a kilometer away at the outer edge of a base camp, Eileen and Martha were startled by the sudden explosion from the distance. What was that? Eileen jolted upright beside the campfire. Martha, sitting nearby, furrowed her brows. A flicker of confusion crossed her eyes. There's a surge of fire elemental magic. Someone just cast a high-level flame spell. As a flame specialist, mage herself, she could sense it clearly. Wait, could Odyssey have sent someone to rescue us? Eileen's face lit up with a mix of fear and hope. I don't think so. The direction doesn't match. If it were a rescue, the battle would be happening to the north. But that magical burst had clearly come from the south. Meanwhile, about 1 kilometer to the north, deep within a barren forest, a blazing inferno of magic flames surged sky-high. The massive tree demon's burly body had been split in two and now lay crumpled on the ground. You don't have any magic resistance, do you? Staring at the raging fire not far away, Li Meng's eyes flashed with disbelief. That tree demon was a level 154 plant-type magical beast. It got completely wiped out by a goblin whose magic stat was only 81? Wouldn't that mean even a random run-of-the-mill mage could just stroll in and take out a tree demon? That doesn't make sense. What's wrong with this picture? Was the tree demon maybe in its weakened phase? No, that wasn't it either. The system always gave detailed information. If the tree demon were weakened, it would have said so. Screw it. If there's something you can't figure out, there's only one solution. Stop thinking about it. Maybe the tree demon really was just flashy garbage. Its magic stat was over 1,000, yet it couldn't cast a single proper spell. All it could do was whip at enemies with roots or throw pollen around. Don't tell me roots and pollen count as magic attacks. Li Meng didn't rush off. Instead, he patiently waited along the forest's edge. A magical beast only forms a magic core if it can actually use magic. With the tree demon having such high magic power, it had to have a core inside. Even if Li Meng didn't know what it was good for, the system would know. And if it was edible, the system would tell him. The flames blazed for about 3 hours before finally dying out. When it was all over, only a pile of blackened remains remained. Li Meng stepped across the scorched ground, searching the charred remains. What's this? A perfectly round lump of green would caught his eye. Every other part of the tree demon had been reduced to ash, yet this one chunk of wood remained intact. Its surface was tinged with golden-brown burn marks, but survived the fire. That alone meant it had to be something special. The system chimed in with a notification. Tree demon heart, edible. Magic core, MP 1017, edible. 2 messages. Wait, was the magic core inside the tree demon's heart? Li Meng picked up the heart and opened his jagged mouth wide, biting into it with a loud crunch. Crunchy. Apparently, his teeth were tougher than steel. Even his tough hunk of wood got chewed up like chips. Level up. You are now level 44. 1 bite. 1 level. Li Meng's eyes lit up. This thing was amazing. He grinned and started gobbling it up like candy. Level up 45. Level up 46. Level up 47. Level up 48. Level up 49. Level up 71. Level up 72. By the time he took the last bite of the tree demon heart, he had reached level 72. Wait, this magic core, can I eat this too? He held the core in his hand, about the size of half a human fist. It sparkled with a translucent green glow, so beautiful it almost seemed alive. But it stored over 1,000 MP. Limang azitata. What if he exploded from magic overload? Tisif, screw it. What am I scared of? He tossed the magic core into the air and opened his mouth wide. Gulp. No chewing. He swallowed a whole, just in case it exploded in his mouth. What did it feel like? Li Meng rubbed his stomach. A wave of warmth spread from his gut, flowing through his entire body. The warmth grew hotter, then hotter still, until it actually started to burn. A grimace crept onto Li Meng's face. His green skin turned red. Sweat poured from every pore, and steam literally began to rise from his body. Shit, am I about to blow up? His belly felt like a pressure cooker on the verge of exploding. Overwhelmed by the heat, he collapsed onto the ground, clutching his stomach with both hands. Is this the price for altering the future? In a life simulation, he never visited this forest. He never encountered the tree demon. If it hadn't been for knowing the future, he would have just built a temporary base near that river and stayed put. He wouldn't have traveled upstream and gotten caught up in that battle near the adventurers. Even if he entered the forest to look for edible plants like bamboo, he wouldn't have found the tree demon. Knowing the future doesn't mean you have to follow it. Even the smallest decision, one slight detour, can completely change what's to come. Luckily, today must have been Li Meng's lucky day. Though his gut was roasting like a steam furnace, he didn't explode. In less than 30 minutes, the heat faded, and his body returned to a normal temperature. Never, ever eat a magic core without thinking again. Lying on the ground, staring up at the blue sky, that was the only thought left in Li Meng's mind. Magic cores can be eaten, but you better be damn careful. Like if you're level 70, don't go eating a core from a level 200 beast. Your body just won't handle it. He twitched his fingers and brought up his character status. Name, Li Meng. Race, Goblin Warrior. Level, 72. Strength, 714. Defense, 658. Agility, 517. Magic, 681. Traits, Rapid Breeder. 1 pregnancy yields 20 offspring. 1 goblin is a whole army. Accelerated growth, with enough food. Offspring mature and evolve rapidly. Gene overwrite. Any offspring born from Li Meng are always goblins, inherit maternal talents, and receive stat boosts. The stronger the mother, the greater the potential. Skill Snatcher. Mating has a chance to randomly copy one of the female skills. Gluttonous Devourer. Consuming flesh and blood permanently increases attributes. Flame Arrow. Shoots a fire-wrapped arrow that explodes on impact. Exploding Fireball. Art is an explosion. Don't cast this up close. Of all his stats, agility had increased the least. Apparently, you gain attributes based on the type of creature you consume. But why do you only get about half of the MP from that magic core? That tree demon really was kinda joke. Still, something fell off. That heart alone boosted him nearly 30 levels. Clearly, the tree demon wasn't weak. But the thing didn't make a single move the whole time. It really did just look like a dying old tree.